Alright guys, just continuing on from the last part, I'm going to unhide the inside pieces now and start to clean those up and then add a similar level of detail before finally going in and just making some final adjustments to the topology to keep things a bit cleaner. And if I get the opportunity, I'll just go in and make a couple more details on this bottom piece down here. Now this inside piece, you can see once again we've got another kind of vent shape happening here, and I want to include the same type of kind of a metallic inset there as we've got going, and just keep those similarities happening throughout the model, just trying to tie everything together. So I'm going to make it a little bit thicker now by just pulling these pieces in. I'm going to hide this inside piece. I'm just trying to smooth everything out and keep it all the same kind of thickness and consistency. I'm going to add some hardness to this inside edge. Just going to slide that up like so and create another one of these kind of bevels. But before I do that, sometimes you can notice, you'll see as I do that, we're not getting the same type of kind of beveling that's present in the two side pieces here. So what I need to do to fix that is I need to go from side on, and just as usual, I'm going from these really harsh angles and I'm just moving the vertices in and trying to fix the angle at which that bevel is actually happening. So you can see it comes out a little bit too far here. And by looking at the mesh from these extreme angles, it makes it much easier to determine where these pieces should sit in together. So you can see they're just not really lined up. So this is a good example of just seeing how at a low resolution like this, you've got a lot more control. Now, if I were to try and make such massive adjustments to one of these pieces now, I'd struggle a lot more. So that's why you need to make sure that everything's polished before you go to that higher resolution. And really make sure that maybe not the details are necessarily polished, but just the overall, the base shape. So I'm going to delete these two edges again. And now I'm going to add one last bevel to this piece here. just to create a similar effect to what we're seeing here. And what I'm going to do actually is I can remove this inside piece. I'm going to go to view mode and I'm going to pull this in, and then this will serve as that bevel. Sometimes it's worth experimenting. So you can see here what I'm about to do is I'm selecting these two edges, and it might not necessarily work out, but I'm just pulling them up here and scaling them down just to see if I can create a little bit more of an interesting shape on the inside. But kind of straight away I can tell that unless I make some big adjustments in terms of how this inner shape looks, it's not really going to work out. So I'm just making some small adjustments here, trying to balance the thickness of this piece coming up. Then I might just go in and weld these pieces, just experimenting with kind of what's going to work. If that doesn't work, I can try pulling them up. Because I wasn't entirely happy with how this shape was slotting into the rest of the mesh. But I do like how it kind of comes out more than what I've got on this underside piece. So when I'm unsure of something, you can see I'm just kind of rotating around, looking at different angles, trying to get a feel for what I want to do with the mesh. So even though I'm not really happy with how that's going, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that inside edge. Now I'm going to bring it into the center and just collapse it. Sorry. And now try and weld again. Just seeing what's working. So here I'm going to weld these two pieces now. And if it doesn't work out, just go in, select the geometry, and then happily just delete it. But I do think on this inside piece, I'm going to need to make some small adjustments. So I'm going to, some large adjustments. So I'm going to grab all of these vertices and scale them in, which is going to give me a much better opportunity to make sure that thickness that we've got going on here remains the same because that piece was too big before. All these little rotations and keeping things kind of sitting on their correct angle does make a big difference, because you can see if I rotate it like this, this polygon is smaller than this one, and that usually leads to kind of an imbalance in terms of the way the curve is flowing. But the one thing I'm not really happy with this mesh at the moment is one of the focal points is right in the center here, and before going in and adding any beveling, I'm just trying to think of an idea to get this shape looking a little bit more complex and possibly looking a little bit more detailed in terms of its basic structure, not going and adding paddling per se, but just getting the feel of the mesh right. So one thing I want to try is I want to try and get this. You can see we've got it going up to a point here, so I'm going to try and fix this bevel, get this sitting flush, and then I'll try one more time to sit the mesh, sit the bevel up here flowing in nicely. So to do that, I'm going to have to slide up. As usual, I'm just trying to space these polygons a little bit nicer. You can see I'm just going in and making sure all this stuff is just sitting in nice and flush. From above, I'm just making sure that all this topology's kind of as clean as it can be. So you can see here there's an opportunity where I can pull this out. So as you begin to clean things, the quality of the overall design begins to kind of sharpen as well. So it's directly related to how clean your mesh is. You can see by removing that vertice, it ends up just making things a little bit nicer to look at. One by one, I'm just pulling the vertices into shape, trying to get them sitting as roughly, like as rough as I can. Like once again, I'm just eyeballing this stuff, and I've never been one to sit there and try and get everything mathematical. I think it takes away a little bit from that concept-y feel to meshes. Now obviously if I was working in the film industry, I'd probably spend a bit more time making sure everything was perfectly clean, but for my own personal projects and trying to get across my design sense, I usually go as quick as possible. So you can see in here the spacing isn't perfect, you know, for example right here, but I'll usually leave that type of refinement right up until the end. So I'll go in and just make some really small adjustments to the meshes just to get everything sitting as close as I can. But that's only after I know the design's good, because I do change my mind a lot in terms of what I want to achieve while working on the mesh. the little adjustment I made there, you'll see what I'm about to do in a second. I'm basically trying to get a nice curve flowing in here so that I can create this more rounded shape for this piece to fit into. Now I'll move it from the side. You can see as I move it, the shape of this side begins to change. So I'm just looking for that nice middle ground. Once again, from the other side, just kind of trying to pull things in until they sit right. I'm just going to try something here. I'm going to make a connection on the inside and then just pull that in. And you can see that just enhances that shape. So now that I've made that adjustment to this kind of piece inside here, I can go in with this piece and just make a little bit more of a detailed kind of shape out of it. Before it was just a bit too round, and usually if you end up with something that's extremely round, it's better to leave it simplistic. It's very hard to go in and cut little details and shapes in. So I'm going to try and demonstrate on this piece how I can go in, and like I was doing here, just cutting in some shapes, I'll do that around an area here and just try and experiment with that. See how I can get that looking. So I can just quickly see here, just before I move on to this piece, that there's one little thing I want to add in. And you'll see, as usual, I just don't really care so much for the topology. I'm just going to cut it in how I want to. and then deal with the result afterwards. So I'm connecting a line down here. I'm just going to quickly clean that up. I'm going to go in and add a support edge loop. And get rid of this. And see how that goes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this edge, and from view mode I'm just going to pull that in to create a shape this way. You can see what I'm trying to achieve here. I'm just pulling this down to create more roundness. So you make the point I've made here is you make the design cut first, then you work around that. You build the topology around the way you want your mesh to look. Don't look at your topology and think, oh, I can't do that because the loops aren't flowing correctly or it's a little bit of hard work. You've kind of got to get used to the idea that topology is the simple part, and figuring out which cuts to make and which edges to push in, that's the hard part of the creation process. But once you do it, adding in some hardness to things just makes things a little bit more polished, and it becomes kind of progressively easier as you're going along. So adding that cut there, it smooths out nicely. We've got a really wonky kind of 5-sided, 6-sided polygon here, but it's all flowing nicely and you don't really have to worry about little problems. So what I can do now is I'm going to go in and make a connect along here, for the sole purpose of being able to go in and delete this shape. And this is where I'm just going to go and make a bevel like so. Now I can chamfer this and connect these up here. And now I've just added a little bit more detail in that area. It'll give me an opportunity to go in later and add some detail from this vent system. Maybe get you can see we've got this metal ridge running along here. Maybe now that can slot into that piece and it's not so separate. So now I'm finally actually going to get onto this piece and just start playing with getting some detail out of it. So I've got two options here in terms of where I want to add a curve. I can do something a bit more fancy and kind of go up here like so. and maybe try and create a little... It gets tricky. But I think that's going to work. I think what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to make this, because this piece is too big, we've got a lot of kind of small details here. I still want this to be one large piece, and I might actually go in and add a nice shape to this. I don't like how this is looking also, so I'm going to get rid of that. But I might go in and add a little kind of swirly curve in here. I just like to do that stuff, just give it my own kind of twist on things. But you'll see what I'm about to do here. So I'm going to connect another edge up. Push it in here. As usual, I'm not worrying about the topology at this stage. I'm just trying to get the cut where I want it to be.